We are ready to go, Your Worship, when you are.
Okay. Meeting called to order of the regular meeting of council as electronically via Zoom, June the 16th, 2020. We will have a moment of silence. Approval of the agenda.
I have a motion moved by Rick Owen, seconded by Dennis Perrier. Be it resolved that the agenda for the regular meeting of council held on June 16th, 2020, beginning at 4:40 p.m. be approved as circulated to all members of council, with the removal of bylaw 20-056 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of documents related to the sale of property located at 2 Premier Avenue East, and moving item 13.4 to be discussed prior to item 13.3.
Are there any objections to accepting the agenda as stated? None noted. Motion carried. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Councillor Owen.
Yeah, I have a pecuniary interest on item 6.4, as my son and wife both work in the water department.
Okay, duly noted. Councillor Owens.
I've got a pecuniary interest on the same item 6.4 as my residence is one of the special circumstances due to planning on the part of the town of Kirkmike.
Okay, Councillor White.
I believe mine is for in camera, the organizational structure, as my father-in-law now works contract for town of Kirkland Lake Public Works.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Owen.
Yeah, I also have a pecuniary interest for the in-camera meeting on the restructuring. I'm declaring a pecuniary interest on all discussions concerning the water department. And if there's a vote, I will declare pecuniary interest because it will be voted on as one item. And again, my son and wife work in the water department.
Okay, duly noted. I would ask clerk Megan Elliott to note that and also interrupt us to make sure that that takes place, that you're deleted from that discussion. Petitions and delegations, none noted. Acceptance of minutes and recommendations.
Motion moved by Patrick Adams, seconded by Casey Owens. Be it resolved that council accept the minutes of the following meetings. Minutes of the regular meeting of council held June 2nd, 2020. Minutes of the Committee of Management held February 24th, 2020.
Any objections? None noted. Motion carried. Reports of municipal officers and communications, item 6.1. Ms. Bonnie Sackrider, Director of Community Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council. The report that you have on the Stage 2 rollout is fairly detailed. What I would like to do is share my screen for a PowerPoint presentation, which highlights the key aspects of it, and hopefully we'll have a visual for the public. So we will attempt to make technology work for us.
Okay.
Are you able to see my screen?
No.
No? Okay. We shall try once again. It says I am screen sharing. Do you see?
Yes.
Well, you do. Life is good. We shall start. So for the Stage 2 reopening, just as a bit of a recap, Ontario is gradually reopening businesses. services, and public spaces, starting off on a regional basis as progress is made in the fight against COVID-19. So for about a 2-month period between March and May, most of our facilities and venues were closed to the public. On May 19th, we did have permission to open up some areas within the municipality. And on June 12th, we were given permission to move into stage 2. And this is the latest that we have for reopening. In order for this to work for the town of Kirkland Lake, we did create an operational reactivation plan. And there's 5 steps in this plan. The first one is returning our workers safely. So although we were able to keep our full-time workers employed during the pandemic, a number of our part-time workers who offered direct programming did not have any hours and were thus laid off for the time period. So for example, we are now bringing back our lifeguards. In order to return them to work safely, we have a great deal of training that must be done. A lot of this is following guidelines provided by the Ministry of Health and by the Life Saving Society of Ontario. We are doing both blended training, which will include online training, as well as in-person training as recommended by the province. Step 2 is our physical infrastructure safety. These things include things such as floor signs that you see in many businesses that do indicate making sure that people that are standing in line or using the business are practicing physical distancing. We will have directional arrows in some facilities to show individuals what direction to move. We will have plexiglass barriers in many of our facilities as well. Procedure development and communication. We have created a number of procedures to date, a lot of them dealing with health and safety, so that we are very clear with our staff and with the public of what practices and protocols will be in place. And these are typically taken from guidance documents, and that leads us into step 4 from emerging management. There have been hundreds of guidance documents released between Health Canada and the province of Ontario. So our job is to sift through them and determine which ones apply to employees within the town of Kirkland Lake. So just to kind of give you an example, there's probably about 30 of them right now that directly apply, and they could be anything from a guidance document for cleaning staff, a guidance document for an office worker, for someone who cuts grass, for a laborer, for people who drive in town vehicles, and we have cleaning to do and disinfecting. And then step 5 is ongoing monitoring. So we will look at things like, did the hours that we put into place for a certain facility work? Does it make sense? What can we expect to see at municipal facilities? Some things will look a little bit different. Initially, we're going to make sure that our staff is well versed on what expectations we have of them, what expectations we have of public that are coming in, what support and guidance we can give them. So there are webinars, there's training, there's courses, and there's in-person training that we are doing with all of our departments. Yes, you will see hand sanitizer in our facilities. As you enter into any town facility that is going to be open to the public, there will be hand sanitizer available for you to utilize, and in many areas as well as you exit. As requested by a number of departments, we will have plexiglass barriers that will be restricting the public from our frontline workers. You will see some of our staff wearing masks. Depends on which situation they are in and which department they are in. Some is preference, some is governed by provincial documentation. So for example, a lifeguard must wear a mask when they are speaking to the general public. And as you can probably well imagine, lifeguards speak to the public on a regular basis. When they're up in their chair, they can remove it. We know it is a warm environment. But again, this is all governed by provincial legislation. The next one is enhanced cleaning procedure. So we are following a provincial recommendation as well. We did have a face-to-face meeting with our senior public health inspector from the Timiskaming Health Unit, and we've reviewed all of our procedures with him. So we are moving with the twice a day disinfecting of public spaces, as well as more frequent for high touch areas as required. So all of the departments that are going to be opening to the public will have all of the proper supplies they need for either their own staff or the custodial staff to do the various items that are required. So for example, individual staff may do their own phones, their keyboards, their desktop. whereas the custodial staff will be doing more things like the railings, the counters, all of the regular washrooms, floors, things like that. And then you will see some screening. So we will either do active or passive screening. So at most of the facilities, you will see passive screening like you do in most of the stores downtown. So it'll be a sign similar to this, but without the name, date, that type of information. It'll just be the questions. Do you have any of these 6 following ideas? And these were all recommended by, again, public health. Have you been in close contact with someone? Have you returned from travel? And the answer, if you answer yes to any of those, you are to go home and self-isolate and to contact the Temiskaming Health Unit for further instructions. One thing that was good to note was when we had our chat with the health inspector, he did emphasize that we can be clear that these are new onset. So for someone who does have seasonal allergies and feels like they've got a runny nose all spring long, that's okay. That is not a new onset. That is something that you've had prior and you're accustomed to it. So that was nice to hear, because I think that was a worrisome for people like things like seasonal allergies or asthma or something like that. The reason you see this one, where it says at the top, Splash Park, and we have some things that we have to complete, this is called active screening. And again, based on recommendation from the Temiskaming Health Unit, we will be doing active screening at both the pool and the Splash Park. So that means that someone physically asks the people coming into the building or the facility these questions. We also are required to document name of visitors, what town they come from, a phone number for them, the date and the time. And this is all tracked. So if there does happen to be a positive case, contact tracing can be done by the Temiskaming Health Unit. So here are examples of our different facilities. The Splash Park did open this afternoon. So with the Splash Park opening, we do have staff on site to ensure that we have physical distancing by the patrons that are coming there. So what we're doing is we have staff at the entrance that are encouraging everyone 2 arms lengths away, especially if you're younger and you're trying to figure out how far 6 feet or 2 meters is. And they're walking around the splash pad, encouraging people to remember that. We've ensured that we've spaced all of our seating areas a minimum of 2 meters away from each other. We have a maximum capacity of 40 people, and this is based on the square footage of the pad itself and the number of people that we can reasonably expect to go on there and stay 2 meters apart. So we are actually doing head counts to make sure that we don't advance more than 40 people. If we do get to capacity, and that certainly is possible on these nice hot days that are coming up, because we're tracking, we will know that, for example, the Sackrider family came in at a certain time. If we notice that we have people standing in line, we will be asking them to rotate out after approximately 30 minutes. So that could be challenging in itself, but that is our goal. We do have X's on the fence to show people where they will stand in line, and a family unit can stay together. We do have hours that we have planned to be open. So this is new for us as well. We have not staffed the Splash Park in the past. Now we are required, if we want to be open, we are required to staff it. So we are going to be open from 2 to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday, and we're trying a little earlier on the weekends, 11 till 3. And as I said before, we will be monitoring this as time goes on. So if we get feedback from the public that 2's too early, 2's too late, 11's too early, whatever it may be, we will certainly modify that as time goes on. So we are using our slide attendants from the community complex right now in this role. These are trained people for aquatic environments, but a slide attendant means that they don't have quite the lifeguarding certifications yet. They're more of an entry-level lifeguard or aquatic staff. And because the slide is required to be closed by the province, they don't have an opportunity for employment in the pool. So we're using them in this site right now. Moving on to the Treasury Department in Town Hall. Next Monday is the day that we have aimed to open this for bill payments on the main floor. We are asking people to enter Town Hall off of Kirkland Street and exit into the laneway. So it will be a one-way direction moving through, basically in a clockwise direction. However, if anyone has an accessibility requirement, we absolutely will allow the laneway entrance to access the elevator. The hours of the Treasury Department are going to be from 8:30 in the morning till 3 p.m. Monday to Friday. We are designating 8:30 till 10 for the senior population. So we just ask people if they can to respect that. And once again, we are recommending cashless transactions for anyone who's able to. For Public Works and Development Service Departments, we are offering public access as required. However, we're strongly recommending that appointments are made by calling the main line and determining who you're there to visit, and appointments will be made. And that will just stop a number of people arriving at the same time in small areas where we don't really have large waiting areas. So the appointments will allow our staff to ensure that we can see people on a very timely fashion, and hopefully not put anyone in jeopardy by putting a lot of people in a small area. For the Museum of Northern History, we intend to open the museum on Tuesday, June 23rd. We will have to limit the number of visitors at any one time based on the ability to keep people 2 meters apart. We hope to manage the visitor flow. And again, we are encouraging people to call and make an appointment if you know ahead of time that you'd like to come. And that way we can confirm that you have accessibility to the museum. A change from the report that you did receive last week, the staff at the museum have now confirmed that they are able to open the store with the appropriate controls. So that means that there will be one-way traffic within the store. Cashless transactions are encouraged. Physical distancing will be mandated. The Aquatic Center is a fairly large one, and there's a lot of change here. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this. And this is as much for the public because I think they'll be very interested to see how we're going to open. So this picture is of a busier day that we obviously will not be able to have quite exactly as this. So as a reminder, pools are the only area of the facility that can be open. So we are not opening up the lobby, the squash court, the fitness gyms, multi-purpose rooms for meetings, things like that. It is just the pool, I say pools, so it's the leisure pool and the lap pool that are open. The province and the Life Saving Society have done guidance documents, and they are indicating that the initial capacity is set at 75% of your previous approved capacity. And that is to start. So that's why it says initial capacity. So we will be monitoring this over week 1, 2, see if we can handle it, see if this number makes sense and it's easy to enforce all the proper rules. If it's challenging to us, we can reduce this number or we can maintain it. And then we will see again as the province reduces restrictions as time goes on. So the numbers are based on square footage. So 45 for the lap pool when there's no lanes in and it's a public open swim. 25 for the leisure pool. For lap swimming, so if we have a master swim or a swim team or a noon swim for laps, it's 1 person per lane. So these are much fewer than what we have been used to in the past. The water slide is closed. That is a restriction from the province of Ontario. Payment for activities is to be made in advance when booking the activity. This is brand new for people. People are used to coming with their $5 or $10 or whatever it is in their pocket and paying. So we will be asking people, because our numbers are so restricted, to call ahead of time. Our front desk staff will be prepared and they will be saying, okay, the Sackrider family would like to attend Tuesday afternoon's public swim. There's 3 people coming. They'll write down 3 people. How would you like to pay? You'll pay by credit card. Thank you. We'll do this over the phone. Are there any other ways? Yes, of course. We're trying to be as inclusive as we can. That is the preferred method. If people aren't able to pay by credit card over the phone, they can pay by debit card in person. We are really encouraging cashless, but we do have debit set up for when you do arrive here. If all of the spots get pre-booked, then that swim will be at capacity, and we will certainly try to let people know that. If there are openings, then we would accept a drop-in. I just have a feeling that based on the low numbers and the excitement that we've already heard that we are going to be opening, that people will be filling up with those places, those spots that are available. So we do encourage people to book in advance. The swim standard is still in effect, and this again comes from health regulations. So this is not a best practice, this is a regulation. So the swim standard basically indicates whether you are able to swim and not be within arm's reach of a parent. So we do it by a different wristband color system. So if you have a wristband to go on, it will be applied by the caregiver. So it used to be applied by the front desk staff. This is now changed. This is going to be a new one. There's no physical contact during swim lessons. So if you think back to when swim instructors teach 3- and 4-year-olds how to swim, there's a lot of holding on, carrying, lifts, supports. This will no longer be able to be done at this point in time. We will be encouraging caregivers, older siblings, to come with younger children to be that carrying type person. So if you think back to a parent and taught class, that's what we'll be encouraging with children as they're learning how to swim. Once they learn how to swim, it's a little easier for our aquatic staff to provide direction, but things like physical manipulation will no longer happen during COVID times. We are doing visitor tracking. So if you come in the front door to use our facility, we will document your name, your address, a telephone number, and what municipality you are from. Change rooms are not open at this time. Only the on-deck shower and the on-deck washroom are to be used. This means that patrons will come dressed to swim. So people will come in their bathing suits, probably underneath their clothes. They'll come onto the deck after they've come to the front desk and they've been admitted in. They'll have a spot around the deck area that's designated. They'll put their outdoor shoes, which they've removed, and their clothing in the spot. They'll go ahead and have the swim. And then when they're finished, they'll towel off, and they are going to exit out a different door. So we don't have people crossing entry and exit at the same time. And they will go home a little bit wet. So we know this will probably work in the summer. We're hoping that restrictions are eased by the fall when things get cooler and that we are able to use change rooms at that time. There will be limited access to the on-deck sauna. So at this point, either one family unit, regardless of what the number is, or up to 3 people. And we do recommend that face masks are utilized by patrons prior to entering the pool. They cannot be worn in the pool because once they become wet, they are no longer effective. But while you are standing in line, while you're coming in, we do recommend that you are wearing a face mask. We have sent letters to all of our pool members advising them of the provincial protocol as well as what our schedule is. We are hoping this isn't a huge surprise to people, but we know it's a very different way of doing business. Entry is restricted to vulnerable populations or those with underlying medical conditions, and Health Canada does identify vulnerable populations as anyone who is an older adult, 70+ years of age, someone who may suffer from heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, chronic respiratory diseases, or cancer, or is at risk to a compromised immune system for a medical condition or a treatment such as chemotherapy. This is our recreational swim schedule that we're going to start on week 1. So just draw attention to the fact we are starting on Tuesday, June 23rd. We just have the Monday schedule in there for the following Monday. So what we've tried to do, and it is challenging, and as I said before, we will be looking at this and our numbers, and we'll be listening to feedback for sure to see if this makes sense. So we're trying to restrict the use of our facility into chunks of time on a daily basis. We're trying to alternate mornings and afternoons with evenings. We're trying to ensure that all different age groups and special interest populations have an opportunity to use the pool during the week. You'll see it is color coded, and that's as much for our staff as anyone else to see which pools are open. The slide is never open, just to remind people. And we do put on here, it is registration only with no drop-ins. And that's the ideal, that people are pre-registering in advance and that we know how many people we are to expect at a swim. So we have identified some buffer zones. So if you take a look after a public swim, we have a 15-minute buffer zone to make sure that the public swim people get out. We can do some high-touch surface disinfection. We will have custodial staff on hand to be there after all of our public swims to make sure that we are disinfecting and ready for the next group of people to come in. The lap swim you will see is 30 minutes. So people can book a lane for 30 minutes. If they're an avid swimmer and they'd like to book it for 2 30 minutes back to back, and we have that capacity, we certainly are welcome to. I'm sure you'll have some questions, but I'll just keep going on and then we can do some questions at the end. On to the Centennial Library. So right now the library is doing curbside pickup with returning of books in the book bin. This will continue right now. And the board will be talking at their next meeting in June when they are able to reopen to the public with the protocols that the province have identified. So you will see some change probably, or perhaps not if they're not quite ready at the library, but there's potential for change that the doors will become open soon. And what is not able to open at this time based on the regulations. So Heritage North is required to stay closed. All of our playgrounds must stay closed other than the splash park, the bike park, if you consider those playgrounds. Kinross is open for walking, but the outdoor fitness equipment is closed there and the playground is closed there. The gym or the weight room, the strength training rooms, those are still closed at this time, and indoor fitness classes are not allowed. That concludes the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm certainly open to any questions that you may have.
Councillor Owen.
Your worship, to Bonnie. As you know, Bonnie, I live not too far from the skate park, and I go by it fairly often. And my concern is that I have yet to see any of the participants on the skate park attempting social distancing. They're all in very close proximity. And I know shutting it down will be the worst case scenario because we're going to end up with results we don't want. And I know justifying a staff member to try and ensure physical distancing is expensive. Is there some way that, and maybe you're already doing this, that rec staff could periodically check, go out and remind the users that physical distancing still applies even though the skate park is open?
Thank you for those comments. Yes, through you to the rest of council, I totally agree. That is one of the most challenging areas. We did have a good chat with the health inspector as well about this area, where he felt the best approach was, as well as where do the lines of responsibility fall. From a responsibility standpoint, because there is not a provincial directive or guideline on a skate park, it's not really a town staff responsibility. Not that we're passing the buck. We have all stopped there numerous times, especially when we were first closed and we were unable to get the kids to stay off, but we certainly are still stopping on a regular basis and saying, just remember, try to stay apart from each other, 2 arms lengths apart. And they do it while you're there. And you're absolutely right. As soon as you're gone, they're right back in their groups. It's kind of one of those areas that we have spoken to our local OPP, and they have also agreed. This is actually a law, so they could lay a charge. We don't really want the kids to get charged. We just want them to get the right message. So they are also working on it as well, and they're doing patrols, increased patrols to the skate park. I don't think I have the exact answer. I'm sorry. It's a tough one.
Councillor Ivanov.
Yeah, through you to Bonnie. Bonnie, masks, are they available at the complex? Can they get them, or do they show up without a mask? You kick them off the property.
They aren't required to have a mask. It is a recommendation. So all of our departments will have masks available for staff. We don't have to enforce the public to wear a mask. So we will have disposable masks, and I certainly don't see a problem with if someone came in with a mask and really wanted one. I guess we could certainly provide it for them. Typically, the mask is there when you aren't able to maintain that 6-foot radius between you and the other person. Our staff will be provided with the reusable ones that are cloth masks as well. They will have access to disposable masks, and then you probably saw mentioned too in my report, trauma kits. So trauma kits are if you actually have to give first aid to someone, you're recommended to use the N95 mask. So to answer your question, all staff will have full access to masks. It's not our intent to typically have these given out to the public. There would be a high cost. I don't see there really being a need, but certainly open to suggestions if anyone had anyone.
No, you mentioned around the pool, they should have the mask on before they get into the pool.
It's really when you're entering the building. So as you're standing in line, it is a recommendation from public health that masks be worn. So we're trying to re-emphasize that. We would not restrict access to people who do not have a mask on.
Who don't have a mask, okay.
No.
Councillor Owen.
Through your worship, I just wanted to thank Bonnie for her answer and note that I had to go to Timmins, I think it was earlier this week, to pick someone up from the airport. And I noticed the Timmins Park is closed, the skate park is closed. And that's certainly not something I'd want to see in Kirkland Lake, because the young people do need something to do. And that's one of the few options that they have. And I know it's an impossible situation, and I agree with you 100%. You go talk to them, and then as soon as you're out of sight, they're back to their normal. So thanks for your answer, Bonnie.
Do we have any further comments or questions? We have a motion to accept the report.
I have a motion moved by Stacy White, seconded by Eugene Ivanoff. Be it resolved that report number 2020-CS-006 entitled Town of Kirkland Lake Stage 2 Rollout be received.
Any objections? None noted. Motion carried. Item 6.2, adoption of strategic plan. Ms. Ashley Bilodeau, Manager of Land Development and Planning.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick presentation. Right now we have the final version for Kathleen at this point. We took into account the recommended changes from the last meeting. So everything that was identified at the last meeting is now within this revised version that was circulated to the public. And at this point, we're recommending that we pass this document as the final version. I am here to take any questions, and if there are any, or concerns with that recommendation.
Any questions or comments from councillors? None noted. We'll go ahead with the motion.
Motion moved by Dennis Perrier, seconded by Patrick Adams. Be it resolved that memorandum number 2020-dev-003 entitled Adoption of Strategic Plan be received, and that the strategic plan as presented on June 16th, 2020 be adopted by council.
Any objections from councillors? None noted. Motion carried.
Point of order.
Councillor Ern.
I don't know if something happened to change the normal procedure when I missed the last meeting, but normally, do we not call for a vote? We call for all those in favor and those not in favor, and then declare the motion passed? Because this seems to be a new format to me, and it may have been something that was discussed at the last meeting, so I apologize. Otherwise, I'd like us to follow the proper procedure.
I introduced that at the last council meeting, Councillor Owen. It was at times we don't see all 6 councillors or 7 members of council on the screen, and sometimes can't see the hands up or down. So rather than have to be more accurate, if anybody objects, they state their objection as a no vote. Otherwise, it's a yes. Are you comfortable with that?
I would have been more comfortable with that had I been informed of it prior to this meeting. I'm not going to apologize for being ignorant, because that's something, if it was changed, I should have been, as a councillor, I should have been made aware of.
No, you don't have to apologize, not required. This is what some of the other council communities are doing. I know Temiskaming Shores, that's how they're handling it as well.
I mean, that's fine by me. I just wish I had been informed.
Okay, I appreciate what you're saying. Councillor White?
My only concern about this is when you don't vote, you abstain from a vote, it's considered a no. So just on a technicality, I wouldn't want it to come back on us that we aren't taking a vote. And so all of the things that we've passed technically hadn't been voted upon. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it is a concern.
I would ask for direction from either the clerk or CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council. So the procedural bylaw is the governing document with respect to this, and it may be just more expeditious in light of the concerns, just to go back to the former process. call for those in favor, those opposed. When the chair declares a vote, once the vote is declared, if there's no objection and the assembly moves on to the next item, the chair's determination is final. So I think what his worship was attempting to do was ensure that council's wish was in the affirmative, calling the vote and hearing no objections, saw that as affirmative. But having recognized all that, council as body corporate can determine, and if the wish is to call those in favor, those opposed, and the head of council declare the vote, that would be the prerogative of council. I hope that helps, your worship.
Okay, we can go back to the original format. As far as I'm concerned, it just was a little easier. Councillor Owen.
Like I say, I came in this in a little bit in the dark, but I have no problem with the way it's being done. And as to Stacy's concern about abstaining from a vote, when you ask for objections, the councillor could put up their hand and say, I'm abstaining from the vote. That would accommodate for people who wish not to vote. And if this makes the meeting go faster, like, fine, like, let's just stay with it. It just kind of shocked me because it was a change in the normal way of doing things. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor White.
Absolutely. Now that we've received clarification, in light of wanting to kind of hurry this along, absolutely, that's possible for me too.
Okay, thank you for clarification, CEO Rick. Any objections on the motion? None noted. Motion carried. Item 6.3, spring free tipping fees event update. Ms. Bilodeau.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council. This report highlights the spring free tipping event that was just hosted about a month ago. We did have a very good event. We brought in the most cubic meters since 2013. As it was noted, we did have some hiccups with the enforcement and recognized that the process was inefficient for tracking purposes. But looking forward and wanting to rectify this, we are recommending one option be explored further. We are proposing that we go with a voucher system moving forward. This is something that came up in our team discussions while we were trying to figure out a process that would work. We think this would have solve some major problems with the way that things are done right now. The voucher system would allow for people to be able to use these vouchers at any point throughout the year. So it stops that clog of vehicles coming all within that 2-week period. It limits the cubic meters being brought the same way it would at this point. It gives everybody one ticket to be able to use. The idea is that if your yard is in rough shape and from a community standards perspective, you would get one additional voucher that would be delivered with the spring cleanup notices. Essentially, we would just like the opportunity to explore a little further to see if this is somewhere we can go. So we are looking for council feedback on that. There were other options presented in this report if you'd like to discuss them as well. Happy to hear what your input is.
Councillor Owen.
I like the voucher system. What I would suggest though is that each household get 2 vouchers because currently we have a spring and a fall cleanup. As well, I'm assuming these vouchers would be given to the residents in hard form because not all residents have a printer like myself. So if you could just clarify that, but I think it answers a lot of problems. It spreads it out over the entire year. If people get a notification to clean up their property and they haven't used their voucher, that's the perfect time to use it. So we might be more successful in getting people to clean up their yards. But having said that, I just took a load in my truck out to the dump and it only cost me $13, so it's not a huge price.
Yeah, Councillor White.
So I think the vouchers are an excellent idea. It's common throughout like other municipalities for sure. My only concern is about apartment dwellers. I kind of took a look at the 2016 census, and if I'm reading it right, we have about, or back then, we had about 13,000 private dwellings within rental properties. So I'm just wondering how we're going to mitigate that. I think our current system allows them to have that one opportunity in spring and fall, but with the voucher system, it would be going to the property owner, not particularly the resident themselves.
For your worship, I wouldn't mind answering that question. Sorry, I'll proceed. Okay, so the way we looked at the voucher system, you are absolutely correct, Councillor White. We are planning on exploring it a little bit further, but that was our thought as well, is that the voucher would actually go to the board, not the tenant. And the way we came up with that rationale was looking back at what the purpose of spring cleanup was, and it is essentially to clean the yards, not the units within. So it would probably lend itself nicely to fulfilling that goal versus people emptying out their apartment units. That's not to say that they can't take advantage. I think it just needs to be better arranged with the landlords. So again, it is something that we will explore further and get into a little bit more detail on how we're planning on doing that. But when we looked at what the actual goal of the event was, it was to clean up the yards, and we figured if it's property specific, you get one per property, and it is meeting that goal.
Councillor White.
Excellent, thank you very much. And my second thing is with the solar panel in tablet, I definitely wouldn't be opposed to adding this to that location, considering there's so much data that could be traced and tracked using a computer system rather than paper filing. So that would be definitely something I would support as well.
Ms. Bilodeau, question I would have just for clarification, the vouchers then would go out with the water and sewer bills, is that correct? Once a year? Or how are they going to be distributed?
Through your worship, this is again something that we'd need to explore a bit further. The thought that we had internally was if there was a way for the software to print a sheet with the tax bill that had the roll number or an address on the voucher, we'd be able to, it would be great if we could QR code it and it could just barcode scan. But I may be getting ahead of myself. It is something that we want to explore. So the thought is it would go in the tax bill. It would be an easy process to be able to add in. We're hoping that it won't involve manually having to put vouchers into tax bills. But again, we'll look into what the software capabilities are out there in order to bring that to council at a later date.
Yeah, I guess that one concern I would have, because if the roll number is not on it, I mean, I could give my vouchers to my neighbor, and he could be going out 5-6 times a year. I know it's hard to visualize. You're working on it, I realize that.
Yeah. Through your worship, with that thought as well, if there's only a certain amount of vouchers that are printed, you're still limiting how many cubic meters are coming to the site. So that is something else we will explore and look at.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments or questions? Do we have a motion to accept the report?
I have a motion moved by Stacey White, seconded by Casey Owens. Be it resolved that report number 2020-Dev-028 entitled Spring Free Tipping Fees Event Update be received, and that staff be directed to explore option 1 voucher system and present additional information and recommendations to council prior to the fall free tipping fee event scheduled to occur in September.
Any objections from council? None noted. Motion carried. Item 6.4. Sanitary sewer blockage policy. Michelle Riberty, GM of Public Works.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council. give you some background. Approximately 20 sewage blockage occur in the town of Kirkland Lake in the system yearly. That affects the owners. It's pretty consistent with municipalities the same size as Kirkland Lake. So there was a sanitary sewage blockage that happened recently, and it resulted in dispute between the homeowner, the plumbing contractor, and the town of Kirkland Lake. So basically, the homeowner commissioned a plumber to come in and address the blockage. The town was not advised of the blockage. All said and done, the homeowner was looking for compensation for the town, but we did investigate with videos and so on, and it was determined that was a kitchen grease buildup that was the cause. And going through this process, we determined that there was a need for a policy to address this issue, even though it was done in the past. It was a protocol, but it was a verbal, was not something that was concrete, wasn't properly communicated. So this way, with putting a policy in place, there'll be proper interpretation, communication that will determine the responsibility of the town of Kirkland Lake, the plumbing contractor, and the property owners. So that will eliminate all the issues that we've dealt with this recent blockage. And moving forward, I think this is a policy that will be quite clear, provide clarity to the homeowners, plumbers, and even ourselves within the organization. We've made a slight edit. We included an additional in the policy. We wanted to include a scenario if we didn't install the infrastructure is not installed to a proper depth due to bedrock and so on. We wanted to determine, show, and give direction in how the process would take place in that instance. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Councillor White.
Yeah, so just the only thing that I noticed was missing in the policy statement, somewhere near the bottom, it just mentions prohibited substances. However, there was no definition of what the prohibited substances would be. It mentions, down throughout the policy, kitchen grease, food waste, etc. But I think just for sanity's sake, if we added a definition of what the prohibited substances is, it would be very helpful.
It could be anything from wipes or even syringes or anything that doesn't belong to the sewage system.
Absolutely. So that's the only definition that was missing out of the policy. Other than that, everything looked great to me.
Councillor Adams.
Yep, completely agree with Councillor White. If we're not definitive as to what the designated substances are, it's up for the interpretation of anybody. So having something concrete and formalized is something that needs to happen. So I'm not sure if we pass this now or pass it in 2 weeks. So.
Any other comments? My own personal feeling is I'm pleased to see that we're going ahead with this policy and procedure, because these disputes have occurred in the past. And I mean, I've heard from a lot of residents, it's when there's a problem with the pipes, it's always on the landowner's side, the homeowner's side, and which is not quite correct. And with a procedure in place, there's it's just going to simplify it and save a lot of disputes. Would it be possible to approve this policy with the addition as noted by Councillor White and Councillor Adams?
Through you, your worship, to council. I suspect council may want to see the definition before approving it and see the complete policy. Essentially, the substances not permitted would be anything other than domestic waste and sewage. So kitchen sinks, dishwashers, laundry machines, and shower toilet water, gray water and black water. But to help everybody out and provide clarity, we can put something together if council's okay with referring it back to staff until the July 14th meeting. I don't think there's any imperative rush that I'm aware of.
Thank you for that clarification, and I agree. It's not an emergency type policy and procedure that has to go in place today. So we will wait for that to be presented again. So the motion will be, there won't be a motion in this case.
Actually, your worship, I think it may be
We can
a
accept
refer
the
back to
motion.
staff.
Okay,
Yeah, receive and refer back to staff for the inclusion of a definition relating to substances not permitted within the sewage system, and the staff report back at the July 14th, 2020 meeting.
could the clerk please read that back?
Yes.
She may still be writing it, your worship.
Yes.
The only concern you'd have is if you're going to miss a substance, somebody's going to come up with something weird and wonderful, right? You almost have to, it has to be so generic. There's always going to be something weird going in somebody's toilet or somebody's, and then if you didn't say children's toy, that happens to be the thing that gets stuck in a, well, that was not mentioned as a substance. So it's hard to cover everything off. And I understand Michelle's situation. He's got to cover off, what a foreign substance should be. And, you've got to have a pretty generic definition, I would think.
Through your worship to council, it may actually be easier to define what is permitted rather than what's not permitted.
There you go.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so I have a motion moved by Eugene Ivanoff, seconded by, actually it was seconded by Rick Owen originally. Is there somebody else that I can put in for a seconder? Or Stacy?
Councillor White.
Thank you. Moved by Eugene Ivanoff, seconded by Stacy White. Be it resolved that report number 2020-PW-004 entitled Sanitary Sewer Blockage Policy be received, and that the sanitary sewer blockage policy be referred back to staff for the inclusion of a definition of prohibited substances for the July 14th, 2020 regular meeting of council.
Yeah. Do we have any objections from council members? None noted. Motion carried. Item 7, consideration of notice of motions. None noted. Item 8, introduction, reading, and consideration of bylaws. It's all yours. Megan.
Yes, thank you, Bishop. Okay, first one moved by Casey Owen, seconded by Stacy White. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-054 being a bylaw to establish 2020 user fees for the corporation of the town of Kirkland Lake.
Do we have any objections from council members or any comments? None noted. Motion carried.
Motion moved by Patrick Adams, seconded by Rick Owen. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-055 being a bylaw to amend the corporation of the town of Kirkland Lake zoning bylaw number 12-019.
Any objection from fellow councilors? None noted. Motion carried.
Motion moved by Dennis Perrier, seconded by Stacy White. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-057, being a bylaw to repeal bylaws to sell certain town surplus lands.
Comments? Any objections? None noted. Motion carried.
Moved by Casey Owens, seconded by Eugene Ivanoff. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-058, being a bylaw to adopt the 2020 municipal budget.
Any further comments or discussions? Any objection from council members? None noted. Motion carried.
Moved by Stacy White, seconded by Dennis Perrier. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-059, being a bylaw to adopt the estimates of all sums required during the year and to strike the rates of taxation for the year 2020.
Any objections from council members? None noted. Motion carried.
Moved by Eugene Ivanoff, seconded by Patrick Adams. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-060, being a bylaw to set tax ratios for municipal purposes for the year 2020.
Any objection from fellow councilors? None noted. Motion carried.
Motion moved by Dennis Perrier, seconded by Casey Owens. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-061, being a bylaw to set the municipal water and wastewater rates for 2020.
Any objections from fellow councilors? None noted. Motion carried. Questions from council to staff? None noted. Notice of motions? None noted. Councilors reports. Councillor White, do you care to comment on item 11.1?
Yeah, so I did put a resolution for the National Action Plan on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. If you've all read the report, you know what's going on. On May 26th of this year, the minister announced that due to COVID, they would be delaying their National Action Plan on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. It's important to recognize that they've had the recommendations of the National Inquiry for 8 months prior. The rest of the levels of governments were expected to carry on their business during COVID. And I think using the last 2.5, 3 months as an excuse not to have this action plan ready nationwide is nothing more than an excuse. Already the Yukon is ready to go. So that's one that's ready to go. Where's the rest of the provinces on this? I believe that it's time that the 444 municipalities lend their voice to the strength of their collective voices to ending what the inquiry concluded was decades of persistent systemic racism and human rights violations that contributed to the deaths and disappearance of hundreds of women, which constitutes a genocide. Those are very strong words. And currently we're still losing 2 to 3 Indigenous women a month still currently to this day, even after the inquiry. It's time. So I hope I have my fellow council members' support with this resolution to put it out and ask for a definitive timeline when this ministry will have this national action plan ready to go.
Councillor Adams.
Yes, I completely support your motion, Councillor White. That's something that the government needs to stand firm on. If you invest time in recommendations, you need to follow through on those recommendations, especially ones that are measurable. So everyone was expected to work, especially essential employees. I think government, even ourselves, were deemed essential to have council meetings. So these things need to happen, and these things need to happen now for answers.
Just one comment. The resolution goes through AMO, which is to all the municipalities. I think we want to make sure that it's also received by our federal member, at least member of parliament for our area. I don't know if it's possible to do it across the country for the federal members of parliament because it's under their jurisdiction. Perhaps Rick, you could give us some clarification on that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council. So anything is possible. The question becomes how much would council like to spend from a dollar perspective and a staff resource perspective on this. I know that AMO circulation to Ontario municipalities is in the neighborhood of $400 per motion. And I suspect that Federation of Canadian Municipalities would have a circulation service similar to that, but it would probably be in the area of 10 times more than the $400, I would think, but don't have any direct knowledge of that. And MPP locally is relatively easy.
Councillor Owen.
I would suggest we send it to our federal MP and ask him to distribute it to all the MPs in the House of Commons. And I would suggest we send it to our MPP provincially and ask him to forward it to all MPPs in the legislature. And that hopefully would be done by those two and would be at minimal cost to us.
Councillor White.
$400 is not a lot. That's just less than what I get paid for this job. If I had to, I would donate my wage to support this. We're talking about human lives.
Councillor Ivanov.
Yeah, I too support it. And I'll donate my wages to if you need the $400.
Can we investigate that portion from the federal aspect of distribution? But at least we certainly want to get it out to our federal member of parliament. And I believe he is the critic for that particular ministry. Am I correct, Councillor White? He was in the past anyway. That would be Mr. Angus.
I'm sure he is.
I believe
He
is.
definitely is involved. However, the whole point of this was to get the voices of 444 municipalities behind this issue rather than one individual that has been fighting with these issues for years. It's time that we get our collective voices together on this issue.
I think we all agree on that, but if we can get more bang for the dollar to get that message to the federal MPs as well, MPPs. Yeah. Any further comments? Then we will go to motion. Could you read the motion, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor White. Just to confirm, I have you as the mover for the motion. Councillor White, would you want me to add in the federal MP and provincial MPP? Perfect. Okay. So motion moved by Stacey White, seconded by Rick Owen. Be it resolved that memorandum number 2020-CNL-002 entitled Resolution National Action Plan on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women be received, and that a resolution be passed to send a request to Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett to release the steps her office is taking to ensure this action plan will be completed in a timely fashion, recognizing the government received the recommendations from the inquiry a year ago, and the country deserves a cohesive national action plan to deal with the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women across the country, and that this resolution be shared with our federal MP, provincial MPP, and all 443 other municipalities within Ontario through AMO, so they may also add their municipalities in support of this request.
Do we have any objection to the motion as stated? None declared. Motion carried.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Item 11.2, recognizing the month of June as Pride Month in Kirkland Lake. Councillor Adams, do you care to comment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 2020. Just last year in 2019, the town of Kirkland Lake hosted its first Pride Walk within the municipality around Kinross Pond. And just recognizing the LGBTQ plus community is important to demonstrate Kirkland Lake's commitment to equality, diversity, and inclusion. Just seen even just an hour ago, it was only the complex that chose to recognize the month of Pride Month by changing their icon on their Facebook page to the Pride flag. So this is something that should be done through across the board, whether across all social media activities or we just make one social activity. But so that way the museum, as well as the complex and the town of Kirkland Lake can all recognize Pride Month as being inclusive, and as well as maybe for the month of June, we do fly the flag annually on a yearly basis.
Thank you. Any further comments from councillors? Are there any objections from councillors? None noted. A motion carried.
I have a motion moved by Patrick Adams, seconded by Dennis Perrier. Be it resolved that memorandum number 2020-CNL-003 entitled Recognizing the Month of June as Pride Month in Kirkland Lake be received, and that the corporation of the town of Kirkland Lake recognizes June as Pride Month, and that the Pride flag be flown at Town Hall for the month of June annually.
Any objection from councillors? None noted. Motion carried. Councillor updates. I assume you're, Ms. Elliott, that's similar to the councillors' report.
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct.
Councillor Owens.
Yeah, I just want to take this opportunity. About 2 weeks ago or a week ago, I was out walking by the pavilion at Civic, and I happened to notice the volunteers were receiving the flowers that got planted all over town, I guess in last or 2 Sundays ago. And I'd just like to thank them. They did an amazing job. The downtown looks really good with all these flowers, and I'm impressed that most of them survived the rather cold weekend we had. And so yeah, just thanks for their commitment to the town of Kirkland Lake and making this town beautiful.
Nicely put. Very well done, and sincere group has been working on that for years. A lot of the same people, so you're right. Big thank you out to them. Any other councillors' reports? Councillor Perrier.
I'd just like to say that I was fortunate enough to be able to sit in on the virtual tour of the wastewater plant and the work that's going to be getting done there. And I was very impressed with the presentation that Kirk Sherrock from Ontario Clean Waters put on. Plus, I was also impressed with the amount of contractors that were on the list. So it shows that we're not just dealing with one or two people, that we are sending this out and giving more people the opportunity to quote on this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perrier. Any other reports from councillors? We note additional information of the 2019 audited financial statements. We have a verbal from Ms. Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to council. Just a formal process here to give notice at a regular meeting that our 2019 audited financial statements will be coming at the next regular meeting of council. So they will be coming on July 14th to present that to us. Any questions before the motion? So a motion moved by Casey Owens, seconded by Eugene Ivanoff. Be it resolved that notice is hereby given in accordance with bylaw 19-078, being a bylaw to establish procedures for public notice that the 2019 audited financial statements will be presented at the July 14th, 2020 regular meeting of council.
Any objections from councillors? None noted. Motion carried. Item 12.2, Essential Workers Day, March 17th. Councillor Adams, you're care to comment.
Yeah, this was a resolution that was brought forward through Brantford, and certainly something that I respect is having March 17th recognized as Essential Workers Day. So I would put my support behind that if that can be recognized, and hopefully you guys can agree on that.
Councillor White.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of on the nose that they chose March 17th, as that was the day of the first closures. So that's perfect. And the definition of essential workers definitely surprised me when the list came out. So for all those people, not only people that, you know, work in the obvious essential services, but people that we didn't realize, like your coffee servers and your retail workers, March 17th, excellent date. I support this 100%.
Okay. Any further comments? We have a motion.
I have a motion moved by Patrick Adams, seconded by Rick Owen. Be it resolved that the resolution for the city of Brantford regarding recognizing March 17th as Essential Workers Day be received, and that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Kirkland Lake respectfully requests that the Government of Ontario and the Government of Canada formally declare March 17th to be Essential Workers Day to honor essential workers.
Any objections from fellow councillors? None noted. Motion carried. We'll now have a motion to move into a in-camera session.
I have a motion moved by Dennis Perrier, seconded by Stacy White. Be it resolved that council move into an in-camera meeting pursuant to section 239(2) to discuss one land disposition matter, one matter involving employee negotiations, and one matter about identifiable individuals in the corporation.
Any objections? None noted. Motion carried.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before we move on, I'm just going to take a moment to pause our recordings.
Okay.